Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Wake Up with Ashland. My name is Eric Brooks. I'm the curator here at Ashland, and it's great to be with you again this morning. Today, we want to take first the opportunity to thank our sponsor, Dupree Mutual Funds, for allowing us to continue to deliver this series to you. We've very much enjoyed that opportunity and continue to do so, and we're very glad so many of you have tuned in to check out our series of video presentations. So thank you for doing so. Also want to remind you we are open for tours, so you can check out our website for information about what is being offered and when, and we hope to see you again here at Ashland in the near future. And you can actually come check out a lot of the artifacts that we've talked about on our artifact adventures, including the ones we're going to talk about today. So we'll hope to see you again very soon here at the estate. Lots going on here at the estate. Today we're going to talk about two, I think, really interesting and really important artifacts in the collection. Good morning, Elaine. Good morning to my wife and my kitty cat who watches with my wife. Good morning, Karen Mitchell. Karen was once married to a Henry Clay descendant who unfortunately passed away, but he was a really great man. They're both great people, and glad to see you on our video this morning. So you may be wondering where exactly I am. It's kind of an odd looking location, and it is. I'm not in the house, actually. I'm outside. I'm in one of the outbuildings, and I'm actually inside one of our artifacts today. So it's one of the few artifacts in the collection for which that is actually possible. And I normally go in this artifact a couple of times a year for cleaning anyway, so it was a good opportunity to get in and check it out and make sure it was all in good shape. I am inside Henry Clay's coach. I am seated in the seat facing forward, facing the direction of the driver. There is another seat on the other side, so I'm going to turn the camera around here. I'm in the mirror. There you go. You can see me and the other side. As you can see, there's a seat on that side, very upholstered. The mirror at the top also pulls down. You can release it with that strap, and that allows for air or to communicate with the driver, who would be in front of us, seated high at the top of the carriage, and I'll get out here in a minute and show you that. You'll notice the carriage doors also have windows that can be raised and lowered. And these flaps, these leather flaps, I don't know if I can, that's probably a good example, also can be rolled up and fastened. Again, so depending on weather conditions, if it's nice and dry and you want to get some air and the road isn't too dusty, that's a good way to go. Alternately, you can keep them down to keep dust out or to keep rain out, etc. So, a pretty versatile vehicle. Now, this vehicle was made by a man named John Clark of Newark, New Jersey. Henry Clay visited Newark on the 20th of November of 1833. It was a political stop, basically, making speeches and visiting town, etc. And eventually, late in the day, he was transported in this carriage to an engagement in the evening, and he commented on how great it was. So they eventually decided to give him the carriage, and he brought it back to Ashland. And it became his general conveyance for local transport. So if he's going down to town in Lexington or going to Frankfort or places relatively nearby, he would have used this carriage. Aaron Dupuy, Henry Clay's enslaved valet, whom we've talked about at other times on the show, was the driver. Here he is in livery, and this was what he probably wore when driving the carriage. This was designed to show off the wealth of the Clay family. But he would have sat at the top and driven the coach. And last time he is known to have done that is at the laying of the cornerstone of the monument in Lexington Cemetery where Henry Clay is buried. He drove the coach. He had in the coach or on the coach a bust of Henry Clay and an engraving of Henry Clay retiring from the Senate, both of which are in our collection. He was the only vehicle allowed to go all the way up to the monument. So it was pretty special that he was allowed to do that. So he drove the coach throughout Henry Clay's time. So what happened to the coach after Henry Clay died? Well, As best as I've been able to discover in the documents in our folder, it remained with Henry Clay's son James, which would have probably been here at Ashland. James died at the end of the Civil War, late in the Civil War, of tuberculosis. His wife still had the coach. Her brother was the executor of the estate of James, essentially, and managed the estate for her. In 1874, the coach was taken, I assume, by her brother. Somebody in the family sent the coach to Louisville for the Louisville Industrial Exposition, a show of various trades and businesses, industrial businesses, etc. There it was seen by a gentleman who wanted to acquire it to use it as a hack, or essentially a taxi cab, particularly a night cab. So he sought to acquire it. He consulted with another gentleman about what would need to be done to repair it. And that gentleman gave him an estimate, and then that gentleman talked to a friend of his by the name of Jacob Edinger. Jacob Edinger was a coach maker in Louisville who said, I have to have it, I must have that, want to keep it, preserve it, restore it, and put it in shows, which he did a few times, not a lot. But he bought the carriage eventually, and it remained in his possession. Here are some photographs of the carriage about sometime after it was out of family hands in Louisville. This is another one. It's a really good historic image of the carriage. You can see it's in pretty good shape. I want to note one thing. This is one part right here, these lamps that we don't have. These lamps were essentially headlights for your carriage, and we don't have those anymore, unfortunately. But most of the rest of what we've restored it, but it is nonetheless mostly there. So that is how it looked during the time it was owned by Jacob Edinger. During the time Edinger owned it, he stored it in a warehouse in Louisville, and twice it was involved in fires. That warehouse caught fire, and the coach was damaged. Eventually, Jacob's son George inherited the coach, and in 1951, after we had reopened, been open, I don't know, about a year, he contacted the foundation that operates the estate and said, I have this coach. It's unfortunately in pretty bad shape, but I'd be happy to donate it if you would like to have it. And they said, sure. And this is the carriage at the time it was received. And it was brought to Lexington, actually stored at the Greyhound Bus Garage here in Lexington until it could be restored and until a space could be created for it at the estate. And it was in bad shape. Not a lot remained of the original fabric, etc. Most of what's there is the woodwork, the wooden structure itself. Some of the iron parts are there, so it had to be restored. And it's actually been restored now multiple times. Most recently about 1991. So it's been through a lot in its history. And it's been in this same room at Ashland since it arrived. This space was a part of a structure built by the McDowells, Henry Clay's granddaughter and grandson-in-law, to house coaches and cars and whatnot, so it was a good space to do that. We've actually renovated this space more than once, most recently to add a wall to protect the carriage and encapsulate it. I'm going to try to step out of the carriage now so I can show you around it a little bit. So these are the steps for the carriage. Got two steps. You step down just like that. You can see here we have a window that's open. I'm going to come around here. You can see the door from the outside. And I want to make note of this plaque. This is the original presentation plaque put on it by the citizens of Newark, New Jersey. And you can see John Clark and Son, makers. November 23rd, 1833 was when it was presented. So he was in Newark a few days. This plaque has an interesting story. Somewhere along the line, after it was sold to the Edingers, this plaque changed hands a couple of times and ended up in the collections of the Speed Museum in Louisville. Well, it's not really art. I mean, it's just a presentation plaque. There's nothing about it that is particularly unique or art-related. And eventually, we worked with the Speed, communicated with the Speed, and they said, sure, if you got the carriage, it should be with the carriage. So they sent it back. Museums often work together in this way. And I'm going to talk about that again here in a minute when I talk about the other artifact that I'm going to discuss today. So we are fortunate to have not only the carriage, but the plaque that was on it when it was presented to Henry Clay. Now, come up here. That's the driver's seat. You can see it's up pretty high. That's where Aaron would have sat. You can see it has a pretty sophisticated suspension system. This circular thing allows the wheels to rotate so the carriage maneuvers very nicely. These are essentially shock absorbers. The carriage hangs on these leather straps. So as the carriage goes down the road, and the roads would have been very bumpy at this time, it will absorb some of the shock. And when you get in and out of it, you can feel that it bounces. Mike asked about how many horses would be needed to pull the carriage. I knew someone was going to ask that. At the time, I know when it was used. For example, Henry Clay's funeral, I believe the number was 6. Now, I don't know that you would have had to have 6 every time. And if Clay was going by himself to town, he might not have needed a full 6-horse team. But I think 6 is the number that is recommended and would have been the number required to use it at full speed and to full effect. You can see this is where those lamps would have been, and they're now, unfortunately, not on the carriage. And you can see the window. It also has louvers. You could open the louvers up, get some light if you didn't want to open the window, etc. You can see the flaps from the outside here. They roll up. The front wheels are actually smaller than the back wheels. The back wheels are quite large. We come around here to the back. You can see it's got a platform and this little step. The platform was used to carry trunks and things like that. We have Henry Clay's trunk in the house. This was designed for a footman to ride on the coach, and the footman's job would have been to manage luggage, help the people out, people in and out of the coach, etc. He would have been enslaved as well. And at one time, there would have been tassels somewhere for him to hold on to. And I don't know that Clay would have taken a footman every time he went to town, but it was possible for a footman to ride on that back plate there. And I guess if there were no luggage, he could sit on this seat as well. So multifunction. Again, you can see the stairs folded out, another door. So it's a remarkable piece. This pole at the bottom goes between the horses, and all the lines, the harness runs along it and fastens the horses to the carriage. So it's a very, very nice, very high quality conveyance. If you were to be inside it, it will hold 4 people comfortably. You might be able to get more in there. One of the odd things about it, you'll see this wall and the doorway out there. If you ever wanted to get this out, first of all, you have to take the wall out, which it's designed that if we ever needed to, we could do that. But to get it out of that door right there, you actually have to put 4 people in the carriage so that it sits down, these straps, it lowers down on those straps, and it gets low enough that it will clear the door. I've actually done this. We did it. We sent it to the horse park in 2005 for an exhibit, and I rode in the carriage while we got it out of the carriage house. Curatorial privilege, if you will. Luggage could also be stored inside under the seats. We come in here. This is the back seat. You might be able to see. I don't know, it's a little hard to see that in the dark, but there's actually a door under there that you can open up and you can store stuff under the seats. So that may have been done for personal items or small items. So that's where the luggage would have gone. The other artifact I want to talk about is right here. This is Henry Clay's Plow. This coach has been here since 1951, so it's one of the earliest artifacts in the collection. This, most recent, this has actually only been here since February of this year, I guess. We brought it in and installed it. This plow was a gift, just like the carriage. Henry Clay received a lot of gifts because of his support of American industry. And if you go to the plaque here, you can see it was given to him by H. Hayes and Company of Louisville on June the 1st of 1845. Now, I have documentation in the Henry Clay papers that indicates he received 2 plows. One in 1842 and this one in 1845. This plow was sent to a hardware store downtown at the corner of Main and Limestone, where it was displayed. And it was there for a good while. Come over here, you can see the rest of the plow. Clay actually went down eventually to pick up his plow. And when he got to the hardware store, the crowd was so great that he couldn't get through it and couldn't get the plow. So he wrote a letter in October of 1845 to Hayes, H.K. & Co., saying, your plow is really beautiful, it's a gorgeous piece, even saying it's the sort of thing that it's so beautiful that women would like to display it in their parlor. But he says, I can't get it out of the hardware store because there's too many people. But I will eventually, and I will actually plow a few furrows with it. Well, if we look down here at the blade, that blade hasn't seen a lot of use. So if he tried it a few times and then didn't use it. And it looks like maybe it was stored, if not in a drawing room, at least someplace where it could be well protected and exhibited rather than used. So that's pretty remarkable. This particular artifact has now been in the collection of no fewer than 3 different museums. Sometime in the early 60s, this plow was donated to an institution called the Kentucky Life Museum. The Kentucky Life Museum was operated by a man named Holman Hamilton, a professor at the University of Kentucky, and it was located at what is today Waveland State Historic Site. He wanted it to be a general museum of Kentucky history, and they had all sorts of artifacts. And that remained the case until the early 70s. The UK shut it down and eventually transferred the property to the state, and it became Waveland. The plow stayed there, and sometime, probably not real long after the horse park, the International Museum of the Horse opened at the horse park, it was transferred to the horse park. And it remained at the horse park until earlier this year. They are making some changes, and the way it was exhibited there, it was with a lot of other items and not necessarily as easily seen as it could be, and they felt this would be a really good home for it. It rightfully belongs because this is where it was used and it belonged to Henry Clay. So they transferred it to us. So again, things move according to need and best use. We've transferred things to other museums because we felt like they had a than we did, and we've received any number of things from museums in a variety of parts of the country because we did. So museums cooperate quite a lot, and this is a good example of that. And again, not unlike the Carriage, these things became obsolete and so often weren't preserved. This one, because it was a gift to Henry Clay, and it's such a high example of the art, was probably preserved by the family. Unfortunately, I don't know the line of descent. I don't know a lot about what happened to the plow between Henry Clay and its arrival at the Kentucky Life Museum. Nonetheless, it obviously was saved and well cared for over the course of many years. If there are any questions, I'd be pleased to answer those questions at this time. Okay, well, we appreciate you being with us this morning. Hope you've enjoyed our presentation. Cameron will be back next Thursday, continuing our series, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. For everyone out there, we wish you a safe and happy 4th of July, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day.